You have to be patient, but you also have to be ambitious, because sometimes you run into people who are just too patient and they get stagnant and they spend 5 years doing the same thing. So it's a balance between being patient and acting small, but also being ambitious and just causing yourself to be like held accountable to grow that thing 50-100% every year over a 5 or 10 year period of time. So it's both. It's not like be super patient, it'll happen. No, that's bad advice. It's like be patient and grind, and then over a 5 year period of time you can build something. I think particularly this new generation of entrepreneurs, they're almost a little too impatient, and the idea of the pivot has gotten romanticized, and it's like they're just pivoting from one thing to the other, and it's like over 3 years they've pivoted 7 times, and if they just stuck with like one of those things for 3 or 4 or 5 years, they could have built something. So I think it's both. It's be patient, but also just work your ass off and hold yourself accountable to 50-100% year over year growth.
Welcome to the Building to Scale podcast, where we bring real entrepreneur stories that showcase the challenges and successes in building and scaling an entrepreneurial business. Our host, Jeff Chastain, is a business transformation coach with Admentis, where he coaches business leaders and their teams with a proven set of principles and tools, helping them gain clarity in and get more of what they want from their business. Make sure to stick around until the end of the show, and we will reveal how you can become our next guest.
Hello, everybody. Jeff Chastain here with the Building to Scale podcast, where I get the opportunity really to speak with all different kinds of entrepreneurial business leaders and influencers, just hearing their stories about challenges and successes. It's always an interesting one to hear a new story, just because so many times we've got many of the business challenges that we all deal with, but the journey to get to that point is always different. It's always been a different path. So today with me, I've got Bryan Clayton with GreenPal out of Tennessee. So Bryan, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day here to talk with us.
Jeff, thanks for having me on. Great to be here.
So at least what we were talking about briefly beforehand and what I was reading, so you went from basically a landscaping business to now a technology firm. So tell us a little bit about GreenPal and kind of what you got going on these days.
Yeah, so GreenPal is the Uber for lawn mowing. So it is a technology-enabled marketplace, connects buyers and sellers. It connects homeowners that need to have their grass cut with people who make a living mowing yards. And so we've been at this 8 years. I guess you could say we're an 8-year overnight success. We've got several 100,000 people using the app to get their grass cut, doing $20 million plus a year in revenue through the platform. And just focus on one thing, getting the yard mowed as easy as possible. And on the other side of the transaction, enabling hardworking lawn mowing services an opportunity to have a platform to plug into to grow their business. Before GreenPal, I actually had a lawn mowing business, believe it or not. I was cutting grass in high school as a way to make extra cash, and I just stuck with a little lawn mowing business all through high school, all through college, and then over a 15-year period of time, I grew that to one of the largest landscaping companies in the state of Tennessee, where I live. Got it over 150 employees, over $10 million a year in revenue. And in 2013, I was able to navigate the acquisition process and get the company acquired by one of the largest landscaping companies in the United States. So I guess I learned a lot about the industry over those 15 years and how it works and where the gaps were and where technology could make it run smoother and easier. And I applied all of that into GreenPal to make it the Uber for lawn mowing.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, obviously, how technology keeps invading practically every little avenue, every little part of business these days, kind of things. You think of, okay, lawn mowing, landscaping, that's just manual labor. And now we're tying it into, obviously, technology and apps and stuff like that, because it's just, like I said, just curious seeing how it keeps evolving there. But specifically on your story like that, a lot of times that's kind of, I see very rarely you have the entrepreneurial business leader that says, hey, I just want to go start a business. Most of the time it's typically an experience or something you've had, a challenge you've dealt with that to say, okay, let's go solve that problem. So what was kind of that? And I guess really you said you started already kind of in the entrepreneurial space with the original landscaping company before you started that one. But what's your entrepreneurial kind of drive, or what got you into the entrepreneurial side there?
Yeah. So, when I started mowing yards, I didn't have this like grand vision to be a lawn guy my entire life, but it just one of those things that kept growing, and I kept working hard on it, and I kept, was able to hire employees and do things to help them get where they were trying to go in life, and I was able to just have a lot of fun building that first business, and I learned really quick I was wired to love business. I was wired to love growing companies, and when I sold that business, I learned something about myself that my business is the thing that offers me purpose. It's the thing that lends me like a reason to get out of bed in the morning. It's the thing that causes me to keep moving forward in life in general. And when that was missing, I thought, wow, I didn't really realize how much I was getting out of running a business. And I was like, I need to get back in the game. I need to get back in the arena. So I didn't really have plans to start the second company so quickly, but it wasn't about 3 months after selling the first one that I decided, okay, I got to get back in the game. And so that's when the idea for GreenPal was one that kind of had in the back of my head. I always knew that an app needed to exist for this particular industry. I saw what Uber and Airbnb and Lyft were doing, and I was like, okay, something needs to exist for this particular space. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start another company, but this time I want to start a software enabled company. I want to start a tech company because that will be easier than what I just spent 15 years doing. Because what I spent 15 years doing was managing people, equipment, trucks, and customers. It was like every day was organized chaos. I was like, okay, this time I want to start a tech company because that'll be easier. That's an easier thing. And luckily I didn't know what I didn't know. And luckily I was naive, because if I'd known everything that I know today, I probably would have been too scared to get started. So, but I just recruited two co-founders who also had a lot of ambition and had a chip on their shoulder to do something great with their life, and we just went to work hard on this thing. And we were quickly confronted with the daunting reality of how hard it is to build a technology product from scratch, basically inventing a new thing that does not yet exist. And on top of all that, developing a marketplace around something is really tough. And on top of all that, we didn't even know how to code. And so it's like, it took 3 years of just like working on ourselves, learning how to build software, iterating and just through trial and error, figure out what the hell would work until we really got something going. And the only reason we're still here today, is because we didn't give up. And we're literally a 7 or 8 year overnight success. It's taken us a long time. We finally have a good, humming, profitable business going that's helping thousands of people.
Yeah, I laugh because technology is my background. So you're sitting there saying, yeah, jump into a technology business. It'll be nice and easy. And yeah, you just traded one set of challenges for another. Is all you did.
Much more complexity, much harder. And a lot of people under index on the idea of you're inventing. Most of the time when you're starting a tech company, you're inventing something brand new that does not yet exist. And that's really hard. No matter if you're building a physical product or a software product or whatever, when you're inventing something brand new, you're kind of having to like forge your way through the unknown. And the only way to do that is just through experimentation and like moving from one failure to another without a loss of enthusiasm. And that's really tough. But once you figure out something that works, what they call product market fit, then you can kind of move a little quicker. But there's no shortcuts to going through that trial and error process.
No, and I think that honestly, I've seen it a lot in technology, but I think that's pretty much the way any business. It's obviously landscaping. It's a little bit more proven over time. It's a lawnmower. It's a weed eater kind of thing. It's, for that matter, even like you said, it's managing people. You've been there a little bit beforehand, but at the same time, you're still having to reinvent and figure out, okay, how do we do things? How do we grow the business still, even at that point? Because you obviously went through that twice. So I'm curious. Were there any parallels in terms of the people side, growing the business, et cetera, between the two that you were able to draw on, or was it really a complete reinvention there on the second time around?
A lot of parallels, but on the other hand, completely different. So the lawn mowing business is great for anybody because it's a great way to like cut your teeth on business ownership. Anybody can get into the lawn mowing business. It's very low barriers to entry, and there's like principles and fundamentals that apply to running a successful landscaping company that apply to basically every business. Organization, bookkeeping, customer service, marketing, all of these things like you have to do in the landscaping business in order to get anything going. And really you can learn those things and apply them to any business. And so those things certainly did transfer. And also, but more high level things like a relentless focus on your customer and making it easy for your customers to contact you and speak with you to let you know where they're pissed off. Constantly figuring out ways to do better than your competition. The lawn mowing business is really competitive and built and so the economics are tough. And if you're building a marketplace for lawn mowing, guess what? Those realities transfer as well. And so constantly looking at the marketplace and figuring out how do you build something differentiated? How do you build something that's 10 times better than the status quo? Because if you don't figure that out, then you won't ever get any sort of traction. And so those things did transfer. But where there was a lot of drop off and things I had to kind of learn from scratch was I, when I was building my landscaping company, there were other big landscaping companies in other cities that I could kind of study. I was in Nashville. And so I remember every year there was a big conference and I would go to this conference and I would look at these large landscaping companies that were doing 30, 40, $50 million a year in revenue. My little business might've been doing 3 or 4 at the time. And I thought, okay, I can learn from these guys and I can steal some of their processes and I can implement some of their routines into my business. And that was great. And that was one way I was able to level that business up. There isn't a lot of that parallel when you're inventing a brand new product from scratch, like we did with GreenPal. We did do a little bit with it in terms of studying, Postmates, DoorDash, Uber Eats, Lyft, Wag, Rover. These are all like multi-sided peer-to-peer marketplaces. We did try to borrow a lot from what they were doing, but there was no app just for lawn mowing that we could look to and say, okay, let's copy them but do it better. And so that was something I didn't understand how hard that was going to be, and how many, just quite frankly, years of just trial and error it was going to take. I didn't know that day one, and the only way you can kind of learn is just to get in there and start trying stuff and failing and learning from your mistakes and keeping going, keep moving forward, not give up, and be willing to dedicate 5, 10, 15 years to it.
Yeah, no, it's true. Very rarely do you have the overnight success of business kind of a thing there. That it's a constant growing process, constant evolution. That even if you did go out the gate right there with it right off the bat, especially in technology, you probably would have reinvented it 3 times by now anyways. So
yes. And one thing I've learned over the last 8 years is when you do see those things that kind of appear like overnight successes, what you don't realize is that founder or that founding team is like on their 3rd or 4th failure of something else that nobody ever knew about. And it's like the thing that worked was like what they applied all of that knowledge to and all of those lessons to the thing that worked. So you're not looking at 3 or 4 or 5 years. You're usually looking at like a 10 or a 15-year journey that founder has been through. And in 99% of the cases, there's no shortcut for any of that. You have to go through those trials and errors. Like take Uber, for example. That was Travis Kalanick's 3rd or 4th company. And it still took 12 years to build that company. And so this stuff takes time and you got to be patient.
Yeah, no, I even go back to like the HP days. You look at that big, huge corporation kind of thing. It's like Hewlett and Packard, two guys started out of the garage kind of a thing there. They didn't pop onto the scene fully baked kind of a thing like that. It took a lot of time, a lot of trial and error, stuff like that. And you can turn it into that, but it's not an overnight success. And it's really that persistence that comes into play for sure.
You have to be patient, but you also have to be ambitious, because sometimes you run into people who are just too patient and they get stagnant and they spend 5 years doing the same thing. So it's a balance between being patient and acting small, but also being ambitious and just causing yourself to be like held accountable to grow that thing 50, 100% every year over a 5 or 10 year period of time. So it's both. It's not like be super patient, it'll happen. No, that's bad advice. It's like be patient and grind. And then over a 5 year period of time, you can build something. I think particularly this new generation of entrepreneurs, they're almost a little too impatient, and the idea of the pivot has gotten romanticized, and it's like they're just pivoting from one thing to the other, and it's like over 3 years they've pivoted 7 times, and if they just stuck with like one of those things for 3 or 4 or 5 years, they could have built something. So I think it's both. It's be patient, but also just work your ass off and hold yourself accountable to 50, 100% year over year growth.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I was on actually just with a podcast guest earlier and was talking about, okay, the idea that, okay, we're just going to keep jumping from market to market. We've got a footprint in this market, so now we're going to jump to the next one, instead of saying, okay, let's go deep into this market. Let's actually entrench ourselves into it. Let's build more value here before we jump to the next market. Instead of being so wide, let's actually go deeper with it. And it just takes that time and that persistence to do it. But at the same time, you got a lot more value. You're a lot more entrenched with those customers, such that they're not going to, your competition is not going to steal them away as easier kind of thing, because you've got a much deeper relationship with them, and that just takes the time to build it.
I think, yeah, for me, going deep is the best strategy. If you go wide, then you're kind of not really the best at anything. Although there are cases of people, of founders pulling it off. But in my opinion, the best strategy is to go deep on one thing, be the best in the world at one thing, or the best in your market at one thing. It doesn't matter if you have a coffee shop or a hair salon or a construction company, or if you're trying to build a tech product like what we're talking about here. You have to be the best in your market at one thing to build a successful business around it. And if you don't focus and go deep, you won't be the best. And the other thing too is how you communicate that value proposition to people who don't necessarily know what it is you do. Like, the human brain is wired to avoid complexity. It only wants to understand things that are super clear, super easy to understand. Like, in less than 3 seconds, like, somebody needs to understand, where am I, what can I do here, and why does it matter? And unless you are just focused on one use case, it's almost impossible to communicate that so quickly.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because that's one of the things I typically work with clients on, is getting that vision and that little statement clear, because really you want your entire team bought in on that. You want your entire team to sit there and be your sales force effectively, kind of a thing. And if you've got so wide that somebody asks them, hey, what's your company do? And they can't figure it out. You got 10 different divisions here doing 10 different products. It dilutes that resource for sure.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It matters to your customers, and it also matters to your team. Like, everybody on the team needs to be able to answer, like, what am I doing here, and why does it matter? And why do we do what we do? And if it's not like crystal clear what this organization does and what its goals are, then everybody, it gets fragmented and diluted, and it's hard to like have everybody focused on that one thing and to be the best in the market at it. So that's my personal philosophy on business building, is like, focus on just one use case, be the best at that one thing, and just kick your competition's butt on that one thing. That is what can help you build a successful business.
Yeah. So talking about the people side there with getting everybody on board, what's been your kind of journey with that in terms of building out your team, building out your organization, especially on the second go round here with GreenPal, where it wasn't necessarily your expertise in technology. Well, what's been your kind of what's been your path, your journey right there, and getting from, you said 3 people, I guess, initially with GreenPal, up to 20 some odd now, and the lawn scout company before was even bigger than that.
Yeah, it's that's one of the hardest things in business is getting the right people on the bus and getting the wrong people off the bus. Like that's that Jim Collins quote from Good to Great. And for me, what I've learned the second time around, the first time I just got whoever I could get, and I suffered a lot of average players. And what I didn't really realize what was happening over time was like B and C players attract B and C players, and they scare off and ward off A players. And so I didn't understand that in the first business. So in the second business, I began to like understand that, okay, well, I can't necessarily hire the best talent right now because I don't have the money for it. But what I can do is I can hire them for like 1 hour a week. And what I learned was it's better to have the best for 1 hour a week or 5 hours a month than it is to have somebody who's average or not really good for 40 hours a week. And so today you can fractionally hire people and hire them on an a la carte basis. And bring in the best for what you can afford, and not have to suffer people who just aren't necessarily good or motivated or driven to do whatever it is you want, and whatever it is the company needs done. And so I learned that the hard way. This time around, that has worked. We bootstrapped this business from zero revenue, and so in the early days, like, we couldn't hire the best engineers, but we could hire like a really, really, really good engineer for like 1 hour a week to guide everything else we were doing. And then as time went on, we could pay them to do more and more and more, until where we eventually could get them on full time. The same for a CMO or CFO or CPO. All of these people, like if you can hire the best for just a fractional amount of time, it's a lot better than just hiring somebody fresh out of school for 40 hours a week. So that's a tactical thing that I've learned, running two different companies.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I've seen a lot more of the fractional kind of side really appearing on the market here. Granted, people have been doing it, but that terminology and that kind of exposure has really shown up a lot more. I talked with a fractional COO. I'm trying to remember which episode it was now, a while back, kind of a thing there, but just that kind of same mentality of saying, hey, bring somebody in. Honestly, as a startup, I don't know that you even need you don't need a CFO. You don't need a CMO or anything like that. Right. But like you said, having that expertise just for 5-10 hours kind of a thing there still can help you move forward without having, like I said, the full-time salary that honestly you don't even necessarily need, even if you could afford it, kind of a thing.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that can get you from like 7 figures to 8 figures. That's the thing that can get you from 6 figures to 7 figures, is bringing on really like high level, like NFL level talent at a fractional basis into your business. You can't necessarily afford them full time, but you can afford them for 1 hour a week. That exposes all sorts of high level things and high leverage things that your business needs to be doing. And that wasn't a play that you could run 10 years ago. I mean, maybe, but you didn't really have the virtual tools that we have today and the platforms that we have today to where you can find these people and hire them on a fractional basis. So that's like a tactical thing that I've learned over the last 20 years. The other thing is no matter what you're delegating, you need to have some sort of like basic like 80-20 mastery of it. So it's almost impossible to like delegate engineering work and software development unless you have done some sort of software development yourself. Otherwise, you don't know what to scope it out as. You don't know what to expect. You don't know how to hold people accountable. You don't know if you have somebody that's good or somebody who's not good. And so you have to have some sort of basic level of acumen in almost everything, and that way you can delegate it from a position of stewardship and not one of abdication. And like one that constantly happens is bookkeeping. Like nobody wants to do bookkeeping. Nobody wants to do accounting. And so like they're just like scared of it. And it's like, you handle it. And the next thing you know is like, there's no money in the bank. And so you have to start off doing your own bookkeeping. So then you can delegate it from a standpoint of stewardship and not of you handle it. That makes me scared. Like you don't ever want to be delegating stuff that you don't have some sort of basic acumen with.
Yeah, no, I perfectly agree, and been there, done that before plenty of times, kind of a thing. But you talk about the bookkeeping. It's like, just having somebody keep the books is one thing, but you got to still understand your basic financial statements, things like that, to know that profit and loss and things like that, not just what the bank account balance is right there. So it's more numbers.
And the bookkeeping is a good example because we've all been there, but that dynamic applies to everything. It applies to your marketing, your copywriting, whatever customer service you're doing, whatever product design you're doing, legal, everything. You have to like get, I think it's called the Pareto Principle, 80-20 good at all of these things where you are like working on 20% of the stuff that gives you 80% of the mastery. You have to be like average at all this stuff in order to be able to delegate it. Yeah,
no, it's that. And I tie that back to so many different areas with process development and other stuff like that. But it's really a key there because you need to know what's going on in the company, but at the same time, hopefully, like you said earlier, with the fractional people, you're hiring people that are honestly smarter, better than you are in their expertise that
exactly
probably don't have you out writing code or anything these days. At this point, there's probably developers that have got a little bit more expertise in that area than you do.
But in the early days, it was me writing code, and I would write code, and then I would go write a blog post, and then I would like do some stuff in Photoshop, and then I would go do like some social media stuff. It was like, and it wasn't just me, it was my two co-founders, kind of like we were half good at all this stuff. But then we brought in people who were really good, who could kind of guide that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, okay, no. This is writing back in Ruby on Rails code is like, okay, well, actually what you need to do is this, and this. And that 1 hour from that guy who has 10 or 15 years experience saved us months of doing the wrong stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's really the key I look at is whether it's technology like that or just anytime some kind of a board of directors, an outside advisor, an outside coach, anything like that.
Right.
They've been down the path. They've climbed that mountain before you, and just a little bit of course correction to say, hey, why are you doing that? Why don't turn left here, turn right, can
Exactly.
make huge difference right there. And just the fact that
Huge,
you can
huge,
get
so
the
high
market.
leverage, so high leverage.
Yep. So I'm curious, longer term vision kind of a thing. What's the 5 year, the 10 year kind of plan look like for GreenPal?
Yeah, so like I said, we're 8 years in. It's just now actually getting fun running this business. We've got a really good team that we're just crushing all of our goals, and we're growing like 100% year over year. So it's actually fun now, whereas for 4 or 5 years it was a slog. And so it's easy to look back and say, wow, look how far we've come. Like 200,000 some odd people are using this app, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels like day one all the time, because you are constantly like confronted with, yeah, we're doing well, but this is still a $99 billion industry, and like we barely scratched the surface of it. And so we have a long way to go in terms of distributing the platform into the hands of consumers to basically have this as the default way you get this one chore done. And until we're like in the camp of like a Uber, an Instacart, or a Airbnb, or a Lyft, like we're not done. We got a long way to go.
But you're still basically focused purely on the lawn care, landscaping, et cetera, kind of, like I said, going deep right there instead of branching out wide.
Yes, and the reason is because we have so much further to go, and we have and not just in terms of distribution, but also in making the experience better, smoother, more reliable, cheaper, faster, more delightful, enabling service providers to make even more money with things like route density and more efficiency with how they run their business. So we have so much more like value that we can deliver and to our user base, on top of expansion, just in terms of more households using it. And so until we see like that point of diminishing returns where it's like, okay, we're saturated, we can't go any further, which I don't think will ever happen. We're probably not going to move into any other adjacent markets, because we have so much further to go on the one thing we're the best in the world at.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the route distribution thing, actually, because you think of normally the kid out mowing the lawns or whatever, there's no thought behind that or whatever. He's doing it random, but that's costing him money, obviously, kind of a thing. And probably
That's right.
still even happens at a smaller size, small to even mid-size kind of company there, that just those basic level efficiencies kind of a thing that they can put into place can matter a lot. So that makes a lot of sense there.
Right.
So I'm curious there, in terms of growing your company and things like that, and really, actually, I'm going to backtrack just for a second, because you mentioned moving forward from a technology perspective, and the reality is, even let's say 8 years ago, from a technology perspective, we had all sorts of difference. Even the platforms, the mobile phone, stuff like that was completely different. So if anything, your reinvention is going to be still just following along with technology. Okay, well, what else is technology going to bring us that we can get into an opportunity with right there? So that's going to be, that's always the one when I'm talking to technology firms, is like the longer term vision in some ways is kind of trying to stay ahead of that technology wave. Is, okay, what's the new functionality coming? What's the new possibilities coming? Because things you might have envisioned, said 8 years ago, not even on the same roadmap kind of a thing as to where we are today.
Yeah, it's obvious when you're a tech business, you have to constantly, we rebuild this product almost every year. You're constantly rebuilding it with the latest technology. You're constantly making it smart, faster, smarter. You're using the data that you have at your disposal to improve the experience for people that are using the product. One example for us is we use data at a zip code level to understand, okay, this vendor has 7 different customers already in that zip code. Let's give him first crack at it, and just understanding like, okay, how can we leverage the data to make better decisions? And I don't want to throw out the word AI, but like getting closer to like an artificial intelligence type of experience. And that wasn't something that we could even think about 8-10 years ago. And so to your point, as things get more quicker, as bandwidth gets better, and like 5G gets ubiquitous, there's all sorts of things that we can do to make this still make the one thing smoother, faster, quicker, cheaper. and using technology and to do that. When we first started building our first mobile app, it was really, really tough 8 years ago. Today, with things like React Native, it's a lot easier to roll out a mobile app, and it's a lot easier to get developers to do things to make it better and make it faster. So as that accelerates and as that gets stronger and stronger as the years come, it kind of almost in a way makes our job a little easier. And another kind of aspect of our business is it's not glamorous, it's not sexy, not a whole lot of people looking at it. And so I think there's like correlation between the least glamorous your idea, the better your chances of success. And so that certainly has been the case for us. We've been able to work on this thing basically unbothered for 8 years without some, hugely funded company trying to yank the rug out from under us. We've been able to be methodical about it, just go slow and low and build a profitable business.
Well, and there's definitely truth to that you don't have to go out and completely reinvent the wheel, reinvent the world right there. You don't have to be necessarily the super shiny object right there. It's just right. Coming in and solving a need more than anything. And that's an area right there that there's always plenty of needs out there. You don't have to you don't have to go land a man on the moon kind of a thing here, that we're just going to make it easier for you to find your lawn mowing service. That's right.
And for every Uber that breaks out, there's 1,000 even funded startups that didn't make it. And so for me, like the best strategy, the best chances of success is self-funded, using revenue to fund the growth of the company and focusing on something that not everybody else is looking at. And it may not be glamorous, but if you can just focus on making that one thing a lot easier for people that need to get it done, then you can build something meaningful.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. So I'm curious and we kind of touched on it a little bit before, but still diving in a little bit more, going from the original 3 to now 20 plus kind of employees, what is your personal role kind of changed? That I know you said you needed to have expertise in all areas, but I'm assuming you're probably not down writing a whole bunch of code these days, that you're stepping up a little bit higher level with that, with growing the team.
Yeah, I think, you look back at, I've looked back at 20 years of business. I think for me, one thing that's made sense to look at it like a video game almost, and 10 levels of Super Mario World, and like just try to get through one level at a time. So level 1 is me and my co-founders doing everything, and then level 2 might be, okay, well, now we got 100K a year in revenue, and now maybe we can hire like one person to help us with something, and then level 4, 5, it's like, okay, now we have like 3 developers, but I'm still like acting as the CTO, and I'm still doing product design. And you get further along, and you can slowly peel your name off some of the roles and delegate them to people that are just better at it than you are, who can focus on it and do it better than you. And as time goes on, as you move through levels of the video game, you can build out that team around you. And it's a combination of working like on the business and in the business. And as time goes on, when you first start, you're like 99% in it, 1% on it. And I think at the end of the game, it might be inverted. You're like 99% on it, 1% in it. And so to your point, yeah, I don't write any more code. And at that point where with 20 some odd employees, 8 figures in revenue, the CEO doesn't need to be writing code. But that is a trap that a lot of CEOs kind of fall into, is like they can't let go of that. And they're not thinking high leverage. They're not thinking, okay, where can I have the highest impact? So I think as the founder, as a CEO, the owner of your business, and as you progress through the levels and stages of getting it going, that you need to be looking at things that only the CEO can do. Only the CEO can set the culture. Only the CEO can look at the competitive landscape and set the strategy on how you're going to differentiate yourself. Only the CEO can allocate capital wisely and understand, okay, no, we're not going to spend 200K or 2 million on this thing. We're going to do it on this thing. Like, that's the CEO's job, is to set the culture, set the strategy, and almost be like a capital allocator to understand this is what's flowing into the business, and this is how we're going to redeploy it back to work.
Yeah, it makes sense, and obviously, but yeah, I hear a lot of people talking about the delegation aspect and the challenge of it, but I've never necessarily heard anybody go from the video game kind of aspect, because it makes a lot of sense. You can't go from level 1 straight to level 10. And that's what a lot of people would like to do, is I want to go up there and be the working on the business all the time, or I want to get out of the trenches. Like, well, at the same time, you got to build there. You can't, business doesn't typically happen overnight, just because even you try to jumpstart it with outside capital or stuff like that, it might make you progress through those levels a little bit faster, but at the same time, you still got to go through those levels no matter what, and start that transition, start that journey there. Because if you try to jumpstart it, I think you're probably going to skip some steps, skip some issues, and cause more problems down the road.
Yeah, I agree. It's really hard to shortcut those things, and to, like we were talking about earlier, it's like the founders that you see that kind of mysteriously or seemingly skip those levels, a lot of times they're on their second, third, or fourth try. And a lot of times they've already crashed and burned. And so they're able to kind of use that experience to go a little quicker. And so I think particularly if you're just getting started, this is your first time around, you have to go through those levels. And this isn't like a static like thing that I've codified, but like metaphorically, you have to go through the different levels and progress through and like get the scar tissue that comes with each one of them. And that way you can level up. And then as a capital allocator kind of aspect of the founder, then you could put $1 million to work more wisely, because you understand, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to get return out of it. This is what we're going to expect. Whereas if you try to do that flat footed, like in level one, you're probably just going to like waste it all. And so that's what happens to a lot of overfunded startups. They try to move too fast. They don't have the experience. And it's like attaching like rocket boosters on the side of a barn, and it just doesn't take off. It blows apart.
Yeah, no, I've been involved with those as well. Whether it's outside funding, whether it's a business loan, something like that, all of a sudden you got some cash sitting there to deal with. And yeah, if you don't have the expertise, if you don't have the history, if you don't have a good strategic plan on it there, it's real easy to sit there and blow through it all and say, okay, now where are we? We're still on level one, even though we've blown all the cash.
Yeah. Maybe not in the even worse, like you're on level one, but you're further behind because now you've got this debt that you have to service, or you've got these investors that have misaligned expectations who are going to take control from you. If you don't put that capital, whether it be investment capital or debt capital, to work wisely, it can spell doom for your business.
Yeah. So since we're right there, I always like kind of coming back and wrapping things up at the end, just saying, hey, if you were to look back 8 years or so in your case, kind of a thing here, or even further with the previous business, and say, hey, if we just done what was some of the scar tissue, some of the lessons learned there that you might have come up with, might have done things a little bit differently if you had a third chance at it now?
Yeah, have a bias to delegate a little quicker. Is the advice I would give myself 8 years ago, because I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. I was kind of beholden to like hold on to things a little too long, and so I would encourage myself and others, like the minute you get some sort of acumen and you're doing things on a daily basis, and maybe for a week, a month, a year, whatever it is, and you understand, okay, this is how I can develop some sort of scope of work and delegate this to somebody to do it a lot better than me, and you have the capital to do it, move quick, and then you can move on to the next thing. A book that can help you start thinking about that is, it may not be obvious, but it's called The 4-Hour Work Week. That book is not about working 4 hours a week. That book is about delegation, automation, writing scopes of work, and figuring out ways in the early days of your business to offload things to people who can focus on them. That would be a piece of advice I would give myself in like year 1 or 2 of starting GreenPal, is like, okay, look for opportunities to delegate things quicker. So then me as the founder can be getting more high leverage with what I'm doing with my time.
Yeah, no, that's the one I hear regularly from entrepreneurial kind of business leaders, is the idea of delegation, and like you said, delegating quicker kind of a thing. Because it's, in some respects, it's hard to delegate, because it's, especially if it's your lane of expertise kind of a thing there, that, hey, this is what I like to do kind of a thing. Whereas what you said, CEO at some point has got to step above that and be looking at the bigger picture rather than downwriting code.
Yeah, if you have dreams of growing your business to 8 or 9 figures, you have to think high leverage with your time, and it's not like delegation just for the from the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That what he talks about in that book is delegate from stewardship and not abdication. So it's like, okay, I am bringing you on to take this role, and here is what we expect. Here's the role. Here's the goals. Here's how we do it here. This is why we do it here. And like, you're codifying that into a training process, and like delegating it from a standpoint of stewardship, not, oh, I hate doing that and I don't even know how to do it, you handle it. That's a recipe for disaster. So
yeah,
it's delegation, but doing it wisely.
Yeah, for sure there. So I appreciate the time. It's been really good conversation. So if I would say it's probably pretty obvious here, but if people want to go learn more about GreenPal, where's the best place for them to go learn more about the company and about you?
Yeah. If you want to spend less time cutting your grass and more time company building, you can download GreenPal in the App Store or Play Store. Get hooked up with a great lawn mowing service at the touch of a button. Anybody wants to reach me, just hit me up on LinkedIn. I've been hanging out there a lot more lately.
Great. Yeah, no, we'll definitely will. And yeah, I'm right there with you. It's nice in the spring right now when it's 70s to be out there mowing it, but come July and August when it's 110 down here, I don't want to be out there mowing the lawn for sure.
Life's too short.
Yep, for sure. So I appreciate the time, and we'll definitely get all the links and everything down below, but best of wishes moving forward and continued growth.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Building to Scale podcast. If you would like to share your entrepreneurial business growth story, please visit buildingtoscale.com/guest. If you got something out of this interview, would you do both us and our guest a favor and share it on your social media accounts? Don't forget to hit subscribe in your player so that you don't miss any future episodes, and make sure to reach out to Jeff Chastain on any of the major social media networks, or check us out at admentis.com.